you're coming to know what JD at A-level in mathematics and got thrown out of university for failing maths. So I'm going to try and keep this relatively simple, but I do have to do a little bit of maths to get this concept across. And I think once we've got the concept across, you can do what I do and run to the computer, because there's lots and lots of lovely applications and programs that let you manipulate these things. But scattering parameters are one of the fundamental things for RF designers. Sam will tell you chapter and verse about scattering parameters. Sam with his wonderful preamps, I'm sure, couldn't have designed them without knowing a little bit about them. So this is very much an overview of what scattering parameters are, why they're good, and a little simple example of what you can do with them. So I've called it the Bodger's Guide to Scattering Parameters. And for those of you that weren't here, a Bodger is one of my favourite words because it was used by a colleague of mine many years ago to describe the people who worked in a lab he didn't like. This guy was a very clever, very academic sort of guy, and the other guys in the lab were the sort of people who build a power amplifier and spend 3 weeks twiddling it with trimming tools. And he would swear profusely and call them bodgers. But actually, a bodger is actually a very nice person. He's a highly skilled itinerant wood turner from the Chilterns, but it's normally in British slang got to become a job that's done by somebody who's not an expert and not done particularly well. And I'm not really an RF engineer. I've not been an RF designer since about 1982, so I consider myself as a bodger. And I'm very pleased to see that Chris Bartram isn't here this week, so I can say things that Chris can't correct me on, because Chris is a proper RF engineer. Right, so what are S parameters? S parameters are a very, very useful tool, very, very useful thing. We'll start off with the formal definition first. They describe the response of an N-port network to voltage signals at each port. Now at this point I think you're probably thinking, that sounds boring, but they're actually incredibly useful and very clever. And what they do is they allow us to describe the most complicated network you could imagine as a simple black box, an N-port black box. So it gives you a way of defining an antenna, an amplifier, a 6-way power splitter, and you can describe it just as a few simple numbers. And with those simple numbers, when you can manipulate those numbers with a computer, you can work out everything about this network. You can work out how much gain it'll have, what its match is going to be, when it goes unstable, if it goes unstable. So it's a very simple way of expressing what a network does. And there's just some examples, because I thought I'd better put a picture in there. Here's some examples of 1- and 2-port networks. In the top corner, there's my previous antennas. Antenna is a 1-port network, and you can describe it as in terms of its scattering parameters. A preamp, a pair of adapters is a 2-port network. A dummy load, a circulator, an isolator. These are all examples of N-port networks. So you can describe your antenna in terms of these S parameters. You can describe a pair of adapters. You can describe any of these things as a simple black box with, in the case of a 2-port, with 4 numbers in it, and those 4 numbers can tell you everything you ever need to know about that network in a linear situation. So they're perfect for things like preamps and defining things like that. So, what are S parameters? Well, the first thing we do is we define, I'm going to keep this down to 2-port networks, so preamps, attenuators, anything with 2 ports on it. And what we do is we describe the thing as a box with a pair of ports, and within that port we can describe what happens to signals that go in and out of that box. So, we need to start, if you take any RF signal and you squirt it into any network, like a preamp, an amplifier, anything, what happens to that RF signal? Some of the signal bounces back out of that port. Everybody knows about reflection. Is there anybody in here who doesn't know about VSWR and reflection coefficient? Good. Oh, Andy put his hand up. Yes, you do. Okay. So any signal goes into that you put into the port. Some of it bounces back. The rest of it scatters in the network and goes somewhere else in the network. That's the reason they're called scattering parameters. And what that scatter is some of the signal you put into it comes out of the other ports. Some of it disappears as heat. Anybody who's built one of my PAs will know that. And some of it disappears as electromagnetic radiation. So in the case of an antenna is a one port, but the rest of it comes out as electromagnetic radiation. So it's just a way of defining where this signal goes. So that's why they're called scattering parameters, because some of it comes back and the rest of it scatters everywhere. Now, so really, what S parameters are something most of you will be very familiar with. They really are just reflection coefficients and transmission coefficients. Reflection means what goes in and what comes out of the same port. Transmission coefficients is how much loss, how much attenuation, how much gain. So that they're actually at the top level, and then they are actually quite familiar things. So transmission is related to gains and attenuations. Reflection is related to VSWR and impedance and reflection and return loss. Most of those terms, especially as microwaves, you should be familiar with. But they are actually specific examples of these things. And as we'll see, as we develop what these things are, you'll see how they're related and why they're so good, why they're so clever. Sorry, I always wander about when I'm talking, so poor Peter's panning the camera trying to keep up with me, so just have to live with that. So, let's have a look at my very complicated looking diagram below. So, I've got a box with 4 arrows going in and out. All these slides I'll put on my website later so you get them. But basically, what these things A and B represent here, just because we've got a pointer, have we? We've got a pointer? No? Okay.
The laser on the end of one of the controls.
Is there a laser on?
There's a black in the bottom.
No, it's not that. Okay, never mind. I won't. So, I've defined the input and output signals. This seems rather odd to start with. Can you see we've got A1 going in and we've got B1 coming out? Because we've got port 1 and port 2. And what these A and B represent, they represent the square root of power. So they're effectively proportional to voltage. But we talk about the representative square root of power. So A1 squared is the input power to that port, okay? And B2 squared is the power leaving that port. So that's your input power and your reflected power in that port, okay? Something we can see and something we can measure. Similarly, now what we can see, once we've defined that, we can relate the outputs to the inputs. This is where there's a bit of maths, but I promise you it doesn't go too much further. If you look at that diagram, if you look at B1, that's what's coming out. That is A1, which is what's going in. This thing that I've called S11, which is going that way, multiplied by A1, plus this signal, A2, multiplied by S12. Can you all see that? That's how this B1 thing is made up. It's what goes in times the reflection coefficient coming out, and it's what's going into the other port times the transmission coefficient in that direction. Everybody with me so far? And the reason it's like that, S12 means the value of the signal at 1 divided by 2. One of the things that Sam said to me a couple of days ago when I was talking to him about this, he says, I can never understand why it's 1, 2 and not 2, 1. But it's quite straightforward. It's 1 divided by 2. It's the signal at 1 divided by 2. Okay? So we've got a relationship now between B1 and S11, S12, A1 and A2. And similarly, the other way around, if you look at the other port, B2, which is what's coming out, is what's going in that side times S21, and it's what's it's A2 times S22. So what you've got there, and this is where we talk about the mathematically challenged. What you've effectively got there is a pair of simultaneous equations. Scary. Okay. But we've now got the relationships between these, and the scattering parameters are these things called S11, S12, S21 and S22. And for those of you that left school after 1973, is there anybody here who left school after 73? Probably not. Oh, there's Mary. You can express that as a matrix. And that thing in the middle, S1, is called the scattering matrix of that network. But that's enough of that now. But basically what you've got there, the S11, S12, S2122 completely defines that network. Right? Everything you need to know about that network is contained in those linear scattering parameters. And it's a very easy derivation. Right. So, now this is where, so why do you do something so complicated? Why can't you just use voltages and currents? Why are you using this square root of power and all these sorts of things? Well, where it gets interesting is what happens, there's our scattering matrix or scattering equations. Now, what happens when you take port 2 and you match it? What happens when you take an antenna, transmission line and you match it with a load? What happens? No reflected power, right? Yeah? So, what that means is when you terminate one of the ports of our random network, that sets this reflected square root of power, this A2 signal becomes 0. Everybody's happy with that. You terminate, you tune your antenna to get no reflected power. So, what we do is, if we terminate it in the characteristic impedance, that sets A2 to 0. And similarly, what that means is, if you look at that top equation again, if there's no reflected power, there's no A2, so that last product, S12 times A2, becomes 0. So what ends up, because S11 then becomes just B1 over A1. So when this network's terminated in the characteristic impedance, the 50 ohms, it's matched. S11 is the input reflection coefficient. Right? You can measure that. You can measure with a slotted line or with a network analyzer, you can measure the input reflection coefficient. So if you take your network, take your transistor, your attenuator, anything, you terminate it in Z0, measure its input reflection coefficient, you've measured S11. So you've got the first of these magic parameters that means everything about that network. And I think you're already ahead of me probably now. B2 over A1, if you look at the bottom equation, when you've got A2 equals 0, that now becomes the forward transmission loss. So you take your network, you terminate it in 50 ohms, or in whatever your system impedance is, you measure the forward transmission loss, you've now measured S21, which is the output over the input. Easy, right? And similarly, if you terminate the input port in Z0, you can tell me what happens, can't you? The whole thing is symmetrical, so if you make port 1 perfectly terminated, the reflected signal A1 becomes 0, and the S22 becomes the output reflection coefficient. Oh, well done, Dave. There's always somebody. And then S21 becomes the system gain or loss. Sorry, the reverse gain or loss, 1, 2. Okay? So think about this and think about making measurements. You must know how difficult, you as a microwaver must know how difficult it is. If you're going to do this with voltages and currents, you have to put short circuits and open circuits on networks. Right. You know how difficult it is to make a short circuit at 10 gigahertz. But it's relatively easy to make a perfect 50 ohm or a perfect 75 ohm load. So what this means is you can take any network, like and that can be a powered up transistor, it can be an attenuator, it can be anything. You can terminate it in its characteristic impedance. You can measure the input and output reflection coefficients. You can measure the gains and losses in both directions. And if you measure those in magnitude and phase, you have got the complete description of that network. And think how else this extends. If you're terminating Z0, it means that you can have long 50 ohm coax leads back to your test gear, as long as everything is in Z0. So you can do a measurement on a device remotely, so you can get a transistor, put it in a jig, connect up a pair of coax cables, run into the next room with your long coax cables where your network analyzer is, measure the input reflection, output reflection coefficient, gains and losses of that network, and you fully define that transistor right down to its terminals. You don't have to worry about long leads, straggly bits, anything like that. The big advantage of S-parameters is you can measure things, and you can measure things in a 50 ohm matched system, because as long as the system's matched, your A2 is 0 and your A1 is 0, and these equations come down to the simple reflection coefficients and forward transmission losses and reverse transmission losses. So you now have a fantastic way of measuring what a network is. So and once you've got these 4 parameters, you've fully defined that two-port network. I'll let that sink in or have a drink. And check the timer. So just to summarise, if you take your multi-port, and this applies to a multi-port network, you just end up with n-squared parameters. So a 3-port network's got 9 parameters, a 4-port's got 4 squared, like that. Okay? So S11 with the output terminated, S11 is the input reflection coefficient, which you can measure. You just measure the forward and reverse magnitude and phase. S12 is the reverse transmission coefficient, and it's 1, 2 because it's port 1 over port 2. So what you measure at port 1 depending on what you put in port 2. S21 is the forward transmission coefficient, the gain, the loss, whatever you want to call it. Port 2 over port 1. And S22 is the output reflection coefficient. So you've now got these wonderful set of 4 parameters which fully defines the network, and you can measure them just by getting your measurement system on the end of a matched piece of coax onto your jig, and you can take them from there. Now, some of you are probably thinking, some of you are probably, well, now, if you look at some data sheets for transistors, that's a typical data sheet where you get the frequency along that axis there, 0.1 to 6 gigahertz, for instance. You've got the magnitude and angle of the S11. You've got S21 in dBs and in magnitude and angle, and you just get a set of, so that's a typical set of scattering parameters.
Why do you always give you dBs?
I don't know really, because you never actually use them.
And they're 20 long anyway.
No, you never actually use them, but that's a typical, that's what you'll see on a transistor data sheet. Now, there's also something I've not mentioned is, not that you've defined these parameters a whole load of frequencies. Because you're in a 50 ohm match system, you can make a swept measurement on this device. And you'll still be terminating resistive 50 ohms or 75 ohms, and you can make a swept measurement on the device. So not only can you define it what everything does at one frequency, you can do it over a frequency range. And you'll often see, on some data sheets, you'll see charts like that, which is my old friend the Smith chart. I love Smith charts. And there's a plot of a device from 200 to 1200 megahertz plotted on the Smith chart. Now, and of course, don't forget this is magnitude and angle. And once you plot this on a Smith chart in magnitude and angle, you can read off the actual impedance and normalised impedance. So you can get loads of information from these S parameters. Really good things. And you'll see S21 shown on just on an ordinary polar plot, which is magnitude and angle. So if you take, for instance, that one, if you take 500 megahertz, it's 5 angle about 75 degrees. And that's the scattering, that's the S21 of a particular device. And you see the scattering parameters vary with frequency, but you can plot them and you know exactly what they are. So, why do we use them? They're defined with the network ports terminated in the system impedance, which is arbitrary. Most things it's 50 ohms. It's easy to measure because you terminate the device in the system measurement impedances. If you've got a 50 ohm network analyzer, you terminate the device in 50 ohms. The termination's resistive, and you can make a very accurate resistive termination at SHF and beyond. You don't need to tune anything to get Z0 because it's resistive. It's 50, 75 ohms. You can make broadband swept measurements. You can measure the device at the end of a long coax lead, so you can have your antenna up a mast and you can still measure its S parameters. You can use you can measure different devices on the same setup. You can measure transistors, antennas and things on the same setup. You just need to make a jig to put the transistor in. You can measure devices in their packages, you can measure them out of their packages. And if you've got a resistive termination, the chances are when you power up a transistor and put a 50 ohm rod on the input and the output, it won't go unstable when you try to measure it. So lots of advantages with S parameters, and that's why they've been used since about 1968. The last time I was an RF engineer. Now, Dave's getting really embarrassing, isn't it? It was Dave. Right. Now, how many people are now asking what good is a set of impedances or a set of measurements when the transistors terminate directly in 50 ohms? How many people take a transistor and terminate in 50 ohms? You don't, do you? What you actually do is you do what I've done at the bottom, and the device doesn't actually see 50 ohms at all. So in practice, the device never actually gives you its S parameters. It only has that value when it's terminated in 50 ohms. But it doesn't matter because this is where the maths comes in. And this is why I run for the computer now. Because what you can do, once you've got all these things defined with 50 ohm terminations, by jiggling around with the maths and being incredibly clever or getting your computer out that does it for you, you can derive from that, for a given device like a transistor or a valve or anything you want, you can find how much gain it can give at a particular frequency, the absolute maximum it can give, how much gain it can give and not go unstable. You can work out things known as stability factors, which is just a number that defines, those of you that's ever worked on preamps and things, you'll find that, or any sort of things, you'll find that some amplifiers go unstable with certain loads on them. You can work out from S parameters on linear things, you can work out when it's going to go unstable and you can avoid it happening. You can work out the input and output impedances for a given gain, and this is where the matching comes along. You can work out what impedances to actually present to it, because you don't present it with Z0. That's just a measurement technique. But you can work out what impedance is to present it to give you a given gain, because the impedance you present to it will depend on what gain you want. And more than that, the one that gives you the best gain doesn't always give you the best noise figure. But you can also work out the best match, the best impedance to give you the best noise figure. And all through these 4 S parameters. I keep using the word linear, because when things get into things like class C and pulses and things, the whole thing becomes a bit messier. But things like preamps, which are generally linear, and anything that's a linear network, you can analyse from getting those 4 parameters for the device, you can work out all these things. And you can design an amplifier. Once you've got the S parameters, you can design an amplifier. So they're brilliant. They're easy to measure. And if you've got something to juggle the equations for you, you can come up with all these things and you can do design and matching. Great things. I love them. So then you can match the input and output circuits, and you can design your amplifier, and you can compete with sound. No, you can't compete with sound. These amplifiers are marvellous. So, just as an example of what I'm going to do is just look at the data of a low noise device. I've just chosen this one. It's an ATF521P8, and it's one of these little impossible to solder down devices. I just picked one at random that happened to have some nice numbers. This is a transistor. It's a PHEMT, the sort of thing that Sam uses in his amplifiers, but in a slightly different package. And I'm going to look at the S parameters of this device and show you with a computer how you can work out some of these things and try and relate these S parameters to things that you want to measure. So I'm going to run up another program now, so let's hope this works. I'm going to run up a very nice free program from Agilent called AppCAD. I'm afraid it's got a Smith chart. Sorry folks. So, what you do with this is I've loaded up the scattering parameters of this device, and let's just have a look at the file. Oops. And this looks very similar to what you saw on the data sheet. You've got a set of parameters, you've got the frequency, and you've got the S parameters as magnitude and phase angle going in that direction. So you get that straight off the data sheet, or you get it off the Argo website. You just pull the parameters off as a file and load them into your program.
That's not dBs.
Sorry?
That's not dBs this time.
That's not?
That's not dBs.
No, that's not dBs this time, because dBs are just, I think it's a bit of salesmanship just to say how much gain you might possibly get, but it's not really very true. So, that's what a set of S parameters look like. You can see them on any data sheet. Now, if you plot those, let's just have a look at what let's just take S11 and let's plot it on a Smith chart, and let's do it as, so you can see, let's do it for an interesting frequency range. I'll do it from 2,500 to 3,500 megahertz in steps of, I'm not even put the dots on. Just bear with me while I do this, because you can't save these things on project numbers. Let's do it in big steps, so you can see the dots. Right. Okay. So let's do 3,000. Let's do 3,000 to 4,000. That makes more sense. Just bear with me while there we go. Okay, that's what I want to show. So there you've got plotted on a polar plot, a Smith chart. That's the S parameters. That's part of that file plotted on a chart. And this is S11. This is the one I said was the input reflection. This is the input reflection coefficient that you'd see on that device when that device was terminated in 50 ohms in Z dollars. And you see I've done three distinct frequencies, and you can see, you can read the impedance off the Smith chart. It would be 0.1 plus 0.3 roughly. And that's plotted at three discrete frequencies. So that's what you might see on the data sheet for S11. Now, if you want to match that, you have to present the device. That's the impedance that the device wants to see. So you have to present that with what's known as its conjugate, which means the same resistance but the opposite sign of reactance. So if you've got a device that's inductive, you have to match it with a capacitor to get rid of the inductance. So there's a thing known as the complex conjugate of S11, and as you might expect, It's directly on the opposite side of the chart. Okay? Now, so if we go back to, if we have a thing that's got no, if we've got no reflection, those two things are just the conjugate of each other. So if you design an amplifier so that its networks look like that one on the bottom half of the chart, you'll be pretty close to a good match. But actually, if you manipulate all the S parameters, you actually come up with the optimum reflection coefficient, taking into account the reverse transmission. Because don't forget, we've got forward, this is not a perfect network. And you can see the two are very, very close. So you can turn the handle on the maths, and if you look at the one that says gamma ms, which is the circles on the bottom line, these are what you have to match back to 50 ohms, which is the centre of the chart, if you remember. So what you've now got is you've got this thing gamma ms is the input reflection coefficient when the device is terminated with the correct impedance, not with S1, not with 75 ohms. So the one with the triangles on is what you see when it's terminated in 50 ohms or 75 ohms, the system impedance, and the one with the circles on is what you'll actually see when it's correctly matched to give you maximum output power. And all this program does is save you the grief of working out the maths. So there you have, so having now got the S parameters, you can calculate this thing gamma ms, and you know what, and then you can calculate what your matching network is. And the other thing, if you want best noise figure, you want something called gamma opt, and that is completely different. Look where that is compared to the others. So this is why low noise preamps don't have a good match, because to set them up for best match, you don't get the best noise figure. Set them up for best noise figure, you don't get the best match. And that's and you can work all that out from these simple 4 S parameters. You can see that. You can see that straight away. So that's just an example of how you can convert these things into impedances to do impedance matching. Good stuff, eh? Now, if we look at gain, what you can do is you can plot circles on this chart of constant gain. And you can see that that thing mag is the maximum available gain. That point, and each of those circles, I've got it set to 3 dB less gain. So the further away you go from that optimum impedance, the lower the gain becomes, as well as the match goes out of the window. So what you can do is you can find a compromise, you can find the gain, and you can find the impedance to present to that device to give you the best gain, or give you the gain you want. Again, these circles are all derived from those 4 S parameters with a bit of clever maths. Now, what happens if I talked about stability? You can calculate areas because don't forget this chart is reflection coefficients, VSWR, or whatever you want to call it, presented to the device. If you look at stability, that's good. That says at 3000 megahertz, you can put any impedance you like in front of that device and it will be stable. If you drop that down to, let's just say, rather than 3 gigahertz, let's see what happens at 300 megahertz. Now, you've now got a region up at 11 o'clock to the left-hand side of that circle. If you present the device with an impedance in that area, it will go unstable. And that's interesting. I've gone lower in frequency and suddenly it's not conditionally stable again. Which explains the mod kit. If anyone's got one of my PAs, I sent out a mod kit recently because we discovered that at lower frequencies we were going into that unstable region with certain, when you presented it with certain impedances. So that particular one is what you present on the input. If you present something to the left of that circle, to the input of that device, it will go unstable. You can do the same with the output impedance or output things, and because that went ping and it's not plotting a circle, you can put whatever you like on that in terms of impedance and it'll stay stable. So you've got all these things, you've got the gain circles, you've got the impedances, you've got the stability circles, and you can manipulate all these things until you get the performance of the amplifier you want. And similarly, you can put on circles of noise figure. So let's put some noise figure circles on as well. And you can, don't forget we're at 300 megahertz here, so it won't appear in the same. Let's go back to 3 gigs so it looks a bit more like where we were. Right, now you see that noise figure minimum point there? That's round about where, do you remember where this was before? On this other chart. There. That point there is in the middle of this point there. Okay? So you can buy designing amplifiers is all about presenting the device where you get the right impedance to get the right noise figure, the right gain, the right match. And every single one of these things, you can derive all these things from scattering parameters. And the great thing about scattering parameters is you can measure them. So, going back to where we were. Oh, I've gone right to the beginning, sorry about that. I didn't need to do that. Let's go to oh, why did that do that? Alright, I'll just page to it. Right. Okay, so you can take that nasty, horrible, complicated equivalent circuit to the left there, and you can represent it as a black box. You can represent it as full numbers, full magnitudes and angles. So you don't have to worry about all these resistances and gate resistances and all this sort of stuff. That's the LD-MOS device, by the way. And you can present the whole thing as a black box. You can measure the black box easily. When you've got that, you can manipulate the black box numbers, and you can do all the design work that you need to do. So don't be afraid of them. Get a copy of ABCAD and have a play. The first real serious application note on this was September 1968, and I was scarily working out. This was only 5 years before I started as an RF engineer. The first paper was back in about 1962, but most people ignored it until this one came out. And there's a wonderful updated adjuvant application note on RMS parameters, which is downloadable from the adjuvant website rather than the Avado website, which has got videos and all sorts of clever, cool stuff to show you about S parameters and how to use them. My favourite website, www.microwaves101.com, has got quite a good introduction to S parameters. And ABCAD you can download. There's a link to it on my website, so if anybody's interested in trying this. But just in summary then, you have a way of defining the network in very simple terms, in very simple 4 numbers. You can measure those numbers very easily. Once you've got them for a particular device, you can manipulate those numbers and you can do everything you need to do to design an amplifier. Oh, aren't they good? I love them. Right, that's it, I've finished. Any questions? Oh, this is worrying.
I think it would be mathematically implied at the very start of this.
Well, no, it's right. No, it's quite simple. Go back and read through it again. I think you might follow it, but you don't actually need to be mathematically inclined. You just know where to find it. You just need to know where to find the S parameters and how to use the program to work things out. Nobody does maths anymore. They just buy a computer. Somebody else does it. Any questions?
Y parameters next year then, John?
No, but why parameters when you've got these?
Oh, sorry.
I can't believe I said that. Okay, I think it's time for tea break, isn't it?